I never imagined I would one day sit down and write these words, admitting things I once swore I would carry only to my grave. But life has a way of stripping us bare, sometimes through loss, sometimes through love, and in my case, through betrayal, both mine and hers. My name is Daniel. I am 41 years old, and for more than a decade I was married to a woman named Claire. On paper, ours was the kind of marriage most people envied: 2 children, a comfortable house in the suburbs, vacations once a year, dinner with friends, matching Christmas sweaters, the whole script. If you had seen us at a dinner party, you'd have thought we were unshakable. You'd have thought I was a man who had made it, who had found stability and love. But appearances are fragile masks, and behind ours there were fractures we refused to name. I met Claire in college, when I was 21, and she was 19. She was all light and laughter, the kind of girl who filled a room without trying. I was quieter, more reserved, drawn to her energy like a moth to a flame. She said she loved how serious I was, how I always seemed to know where I was going. We built our future on those differences, her chaos, my order. But years have a way of twisting what once felt complementary into a kind of distance. By the time we hit our 10th anniversary, we were living more like roommates than lovers. She had her routines, I had mine. The sex was rare, mechanical when it happened at all. I buried myself in work, telling myself that providing for my family was proof enough of my devotion. She poured herself into the kids, into organizing school events, into book clubs and yoga classes. Somewhere in that blur of responsibility and habit, we stopped truly seeing each other. I remember the night that first sign of something shifting appeared. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no slammed doors. Just a quiet moment after dinner, when I walked into the kitchen and found her laughing into her phone. It wasn't the laughter itself that unsettled me, it was the way she laughed. Light, almost shy, like the sound I hadn't heard from her in years. When she noticed me, she quickly ended the call, too quickly. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just Emma," she said. "From yoga. We're planning a retreat next month." I nodded, pretending to believe her, but something about her tone lodged in my chest like a splinter. She had lied before, small, harmless lies, about forgetting to pick up milk or about how much she spent on a dress. But this felt different. This felt intimate. That night, lying beside her in bed, I studied the curve of her back under the blanket, the slow rhythm of her breathing. For the first time in years, I realized I didn't know who my wife really was anymore. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to know. It's strange to say this, but her secret, whatever it was, woke something in me. A hunger, not just for her, but for connection, for desire, for proof that I was still alive. I had been drifting for so long that the possibility of betrayal, hers or mine, felt like a spark in a dark room. And sparks, as I would soon learn, have a way of catching fire. It started innocently, or at least I told myself it did. Her name was Lila, a client at work who had joined our project halfway through the year. She was sharp, confident, and effortless in a way that made me both admire and envy her. There was a vivacity to her, a kind of freedom I hadn't felt in years. Every conversation with her was charged with a subtle electricity, the kind that makes mundane office talks feel like stolen moments of intimacy. I tried to keep my distance, reminding myself of Claire, of the life I had built, and the promises I had made. But restraint is a fragile shield when desire is patient and persistent. Lila had a way of smiling that lingered longer than it should, of leaning in slightly when she spoke, as though she were testing boundaries without words. I was careful at first, careful in meetings, careful on emails. But one Friday evening, when we were the last two in the office, staying late to finish a presentation, the boundaries blurred. We laughed over a mistake in a spreadsheet, something trivial, and I noticed her hand brush against mine, not a touch anyone else would have thought meaningful, but in that moment, it burned. We looked at each other, almost apologetically, and something unspoken passed between us. My heart raced in a way I hadn't felt in years, not even with Claire. I told myself I would leave it at that. That was enough, just a fleeting moment of excitement in a dull life. But human hearts are not so easily controlled. Over the next few weeks, I found myself inventing reasons to see her, lingering after meetings, answering emails with unnecessary care, laughing at jokes that weren't that funny. And then came the first text. "Hey, want to grab a coffee later? Just us?" I stared at my phone, heart pounding, mind spinning. Claire was at home. The kids were asleep. And yet, as I typed back, "Sure," I felt both exhilarated and guilty. Coffee led to dinner, and dinner led to walks in the park, conversations that lasted hours. Lila listened in a way Claire no longer did, asked questions I had forgotten I wanted answers to. And I, in turn, shared pieces of myself I hadn't realized I was withholding, my frustrations, my dreams, my fears. There was honesty here, yes, but also danger. Each meeting, each laugh, each brush of her hand against mine was a step into a territory I knew I should never enter. And yet I didn't stop. The guilt was a constant companion. I would come home and watch Claire from across the kitchen table, her tired eyes, the way she poured herself into our children, completely unaware of the storm brewing in my mind. I hated myself for it, loved the thrill of it, and feared the inevitable reckoning all at once. Then came the night it became more than just emotional, the night the line was crossed. I had gone to Lila's apartment under the guise of discussing work. We ended up on her balcony, the city lights sprawled below us. She looked at me, not as a colleague, not even as a friend, but in a way that made my heart both leap and shatter. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered. "Neither should I," I admitted, my voice barely audible. And yet, when our lips met, it was as if years of restraint, of dull routines and quiet marriages, melted away. That kiss wasn't just desire, it was confession, rebellion, and the intoxicating rush of something forbidden. I walked home that night in a daze. The world seemed sharper, brighter, crueler. Claire was asleep when I returned. I lay beside her, feeling the weight of my betrayal pressing down, knowing that nothing would ever be the same. And yet the memory of that kiss, the heat of that forbidden touch, haunted me like an obsession I could not escape. By then, I had crossed the point of no return. There was no going back, only forward, into deceit, passion, and the inevitable collision of lives bound by love and broken by desire. In the weeks that followed, I became a man split in two. By day, I was Daniel, the husband and father, the man who commuted to work, helped with homework, and smiled for Claire when she leaned on me for comfort. By night, I was Daniel, the secret lover, meeting Lila in cafes, in quiet corners of the city, and sometimes in her apartment, where the world outside ceased to exist. Each side of me knew about the other, and each hated the weakness that allowed the split to persist. I tried to rationalize it. Claire and I had grown distant. We were comfortable, yes, but comfort is not love. Lila made me feel alive. She challenged me, made me laugh, made me crave her. Was it wrong? Absolutely. But was it wrong in the way that mattered to me, or merely wrong in the moral ledger I had long since abandoned in my heart? One evening, Lila invited me to a small dinner at her apartment. She cooked, something simple yet exquisite. There was candlelight, soft music, and an intimacy that I realized I hadn't experienced in years. "You look exhausted," she said, studying me over the edge of her glass. "I am," I admitted, running my hands through my hair. "Life, it's exhausting." She reached out, resting her hand on mine. Her touch was electric, grounding, and terrifying all at once. "You deserve to be happy, Daniel. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words, meant as comfort, felt like both permission and provocation. I leaned in, kissing her not with caution, but with the desperate intensity of a man who had waited too long. That night, we didn't just make love, we collided, lost in something neither of us could name, a force more intoxicating than fear, more consuming than guilt. Meanwhile, back home, Claire began to notice the change in me. Subtle things at first. Distracted looks, delayed responses, the faint tension in my voice. I tried to cover it, but the walls we build in relationships are thin, and humans are stubbornly perceptive. "Daniel," she said one evening, her eyes soft but searching, "is everything okay between us?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to lie so convincingly that she would believe it, that I would believe it myself. But the truth, the half-truth I offered instead, came out as vague murmurs of stress and work pressure. She nodded, accepting it, yet I could see the tiny fissures forming in her expression, the same ones I felt growing in my own chest. As my secret life continued, I began to notice how much I had changed. I was sharper at work, yes, but also more restless. I was irritable with Claire, too impatient with our children, too quick to dismiss the ordinary joys that once comforted me. And the worst part was the thrill I felt, how Lila's texts, her calls, her presence, had become a drug I could not resist. Jealousy, too, began to rear its head. Not just my jealousy of imagined threats to my affair with Lila, but a strange, almost obsessive jealousy of Claire. I hated her for not seeing me the way Lila did, for the life we shared that felt suddenly so confining. And yet, even in that resentment, there was love, a love twisted by betrayal, suffused with desire, and corrupted by the inevitable consequences I refused to face. The turning point came unexpectedly. Claire invited some friends over for a weekend dinner. Lila, coincidentally, was free that evening. I felt the pull of both worlds, the tug of a life I could not abandon and a passion I could not resist. I excused myself early from dinner, citing work, and spent the night with Lila. When I returned home in the early hours, Claire was waiting up. The disappointment in her eyes was like a knife, sharp and precise. "You've been distant," she said softly, her voice trembling with the quiet fury of betrayal she had not yet named. "And I don't know why." I wanted to tell her. To scream the truth, to confess everything. But the words stuck in my throat. I kissed her forehead, whispered that I loved her, and climbed into bed, pretending that nothing had changed. And that night, as I lay awake between two worlds, I realized something undeniable. I was no longer a man capable of living a simple life. Desire had shattered the boundaries I once relied upon, and the path forward was a dangerous one, paved with passion, deception, and heartbreak yet to come. It was inevitable. The more I tried to juggle my two lives, the more precarious everything became. Secrets, I realized, are not weightless. They accumulate, pressing down on your chest, bending your spine, twisting your mind until one day, the weight is too much to bear. It started with small slips. A text message left open on my phone, an unexplained lipstick stain on a coffee mug, a lingering gaze that lingered too long. I caught Claire's eyes on me more often, subtle at first, but filled with suspicion. I tried to laugh it off, but laughter felt hollow, a veneer over the chaos inside me. Then came the weekend of my recklessness. Lila had invited me on a short getaway, ostensibly for work, a seminar, she said, but we both knew it was more. I left early Friday morning, leaving Claire and the kids behind, guilt gnawing at my gut. The city blurred beneath us as we drove to the countryside, a private bubble of intimacy that felt both exhilarating and dangerous. We spent the weekend in a cabin, talking, laughing, and touching in ways that made my heart ache with both desire and guilt. I wanted to stay there forever, away from responsibility, away from the life I had built but no longer felt part of. But reality has a way of intruding. My phone rang, insistently, piercing through our seclusion. It was Claire. "Daniel, where are you?" she asked, her voice calm but strained. "You said you'd be back tonight." I lied without thinking. "Just caught up with some work stuff. I'll be back late, okay?" "Okay," she said, but her tone betrayed her. I could hear the doubt, the hurt, and it cut deeper than I anticipated. I ended the call, heart pounding, and realized something terrifying. No matter how much passion I felt with Lila, Claire's absence was a void that could not be ignored. By Sunday evening, when I returned home, the tension was palpable. Claire's eyes were guarded, her questions sharper, her smiles more forced. She asked about my weekend in a way that felt casual but carried an undercurrent of suspicion. And I, clumsy with deception, faltered. I stumbled over small details, offered explanations that sounded rehearsed. She noticed. "You're hiding something," she said quietly, sitting across from me at the dinner table. Her hands were folded, steady, but her eyes were stormy. "I can feel it." I wanted to confess, to release the truth like air escaping a balloon, but fear held me hostage. Confession would destroy us, maybe permanently. And yet, the thought of continuing to lie, of maintaining this double life, was unbearable. In the days that followed, our home became a battlefield of emotions. Claire's subtle accusations were met with my fragile defensiveness, and Lila's texts and calls arrived like temptation in the middle of a storm. I felt pulled in all directions, a man unraveling, aware that the threads of my life were fraying faster than I could mend them. One evening, after a particularly tense argument with Claire about my late nights at work, I retreated to the study, my hands shaking. Lila called. I answered, needing her voice, needing the only place where I could breathe without judgment. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern threading through her words. I don't know," I admitted. "Everything is falling apart." She didn't answer immediately, just listened as I confessed pieces of the turmoil I couldn't reveal to Claire. And then, in that quiet, Lila said something that made my heart both ache and leap. Maybe we're meant to be reckless. Maybe we're meant to feel everything we've denied ourselves." And in that moment, I realized that I was no longer just having an affair. I was addicted to it. To her. To the danger. To the intensity that life with Claire, in its comfortable, predictable way, could no longer provide. But addiction comes with a price, and soon enough, the cost would become painfully clear. Jealousy, betrayal, and heartbreak were no longer distant possibilities. They were closing in on me, and I had no one to blame but myself. I should have seen it coming. People like me, men like me, do not escape the consequences of their choices. The lies, the secrecy, the thrill of forbidden love, they build a fragile castle, and eventually, the tide comes in. It started on an ordinary Tuesday. Claire had stayed late at the school to help with a parent-teacher meeting. I had spent the evening with Lila, wrapped up in our stolen world. When I returned home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The children were asleep, and the faint smell of candles lingered in the air, a scent I did not recognize. Claire was sitting at the kitchen table, a folder open in front of her, her eyes red from crying. I froze, a sense of dread curling in my stomach. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling. "I know." I stared at her, unable to comprehend. "No, what?" I asked, though the panic rising in my chest betrayed me. She held up my phone. Lila's name flashed on the screen. "The messages, Daniel. I saw them. All of them. Don't lie to me." And just like that, the fragile castle I had built with my lies crumbled into dust. I tried to speak, to explain, to apologize, but the words felt meaningless. Claire's face was a storm of hurt and betrayal. She didn't need my explanations. She needed the truth, and the truth, raw and ugly, was already laid bare. I didn't mean for it to happen," I said finally, my voice shaking. I thought I was just lost. I didn't know how to. I'm sorry, Claire." "I don't," she interrupted, cutting me off with the sharpness of grief and rage intertwined. "Just don't. I can't even look at you right now. I don't know who you are anymore." I wanted to reach for her, to hold her, to beg for forgiveness. But she recoiled, stepping back, her hands trembling. The reality of what I had done hit me like a physical blow. I had destroyed the trust that had taken years to build, and for what? A fleeting thrill? A lie disguised as passion? In the following days, our home became a war zone of silence and whispered accusations. The children noticed the tension, their questions piercing and innocent, and I found no solace anywhere. Lila called constantly, worried, demanding, desperate. I felt myself unraveling, torn between two women, two lives, and the man I had once been. The climax came one night when I tried to see Lila after yet another argument with Claire. I drove to her apartment, desperate for comfort, for escape, for the feeling of being wanted without judgment. But as soon as I entered, I saw it, her hand on another man's shoulder, a smile that was not meant for me, a warmth I could not touch. It was a cruel mirror. The fear, the jealousy, the heartbreak I had caused Claire, I now felt in sharp, searing detail. I left without a word, the night air burning my lungs as I drove home, thinking of the wreckage I had made of everyone's lives, including my own. By the time I walked through the front door, Claire was waiting. Not in anger this time, not in tears, but in quiet resignation. She had made a decision that would change everything. "Daniel," she said softly, "I think we need time apart. I need to figure out who I am without you lying to me every day." And just like that, the life I had known, our family, our routine, our supposed happiness, fractured irreparably. I was left alone, with only the echo of my mistakes and the burning memory of the passion I had chased at the cost of everything I loved. Sitting in the empty house that night, I realized that love is not just desire, not just attraction. Love is trust, sacrifice, patience, and the courage to choose someone every day. I had failed in all of these things. And in my failure, I had learned the cruelest lesson of all: passion without integrity destroys everything it touches. The days after Claire left were the longest I've ever known. The house, once filled with laughter, children's footsteps, and the hum of routine, was now a cavern of silence. I moved through it like a ghost, haunted by the choices I had made and the lives I had fractured. Every corner, every photograph, every familiar sound reminded me of what I had destroyed with my own hands. Lila called incessantly at first, but I stopped answering. Her voice, once a thrill, had become a torment, a reminder of my recklessness and weakness. I realized that the passion I had chased was never enough. It never filled the emptiness that had been gnawing at me for years. I had mistaken lust for love, infatuation for connection, and in doing so, I had lost the only real love I had ever known. I tried to write. I tried to think. I tried to find solace in work, in distractions, in anything that would drown the guilt and heartbreak. But nothing worked. At night, I lay awake, haunted by memories, Claire's soft laughter, her trust in me, the tiny, unnoticed moments of tenderness I had taken for granted. And then, the moments with Lila, the stolen kisses, the whispered confessions, the thrill that had once seemed irresistible, now felt hollow, almost cruel in their intensity. One evening, I went to Claire's favorite park. The one we used to take the children to every weekend. I sat on a bench and watched families laughing, couples holding hands, children running with abandon. I realized that love, the kind that lasts, is not about stolen moments or forbidden passion. It is about presence, care, and choice. I had made my choices, and now I had to live with them. Time passed, though slowly. I began to rebuild, not in the sense of regaining what I had lost, but in understanding myself and my mistakes. I sought therapy, tried to understand the patterns that had led me to betrayal, and most painfully, accepted that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. I never saw Lila again after that summer. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. The affair had taught me a lesson I would carry for the rest of my life. Desire without conscience is a ruinous thing. And yet I do not regret feeling it. I only regret acting on it at the expense of someone I loved more than I understood at the time. As for Claire, I don't know where she is now, or if she ever fully healed from the hurt I caused. I hope she did. I hope she found peace, love, and happiness in ways I failed to provide. And for me, the future is quieter now, a little lonelier, but filled with a clarity I lacked before. I have learned that passion can ignite, but only love sustains. I have learned that betrayal is a wound that never fully heals, either for the betrayed nor for the betrayer. And most of all, I have learned that the heart, fragile and stubborn, always remembers, not just the fire it once chased, but the ruins left in its wake. Sitting here, writing these words, I feel the weight of every choice, every lie, every touch. I feel remorse, yes, but also an understanding I lacked in my youth. Life is not about perfect endings. It is about surviving our own mistakes, learning from them, and finding a way to carry on with honesty, if not for others then at least for ourselves. I am alone now, and perhaps I deserve to be. But in this solitude, I am finally honest. And for the first time in years, I feel the faint stirrings of hope, not for redemption, not for love returned, but for the possibility of becoming a man who no longer destroys what he cannot bear to lose.